everybody. How you doing? Welcome to Shadow at Night for May Day, Thursday, May the 1st, 2025. And on the show tonight, well, the pushback has already started regarding Alberta separation. Jason Kenney, the former premier of that province, came out with a Twitter post today suggesting that people should just calm down. And a couple of First Nation band chiefs in Alberta have sent Danielle Smith a cease and desist letter regarding her moves towards obvious moves towards Alberta separation, and that the treaty lands are sacred. And so we're going to get into all of that as the show goes on. I also have some, I don't know, I guess I can call it disturbing news, but it's not something you've never heard before. It's just the way it's presented in this particular movie trailer. That is a little bit alarming. But again, don't worry about it, because the people, us, we can always fight back against this stuff. There's a lot of rhetoric going on online right now from some influencers regarding revolution. It's time for a revolution. I hope you're not buying into this stuff. And if you are, I want you to sit back and go, Marcus Ray. Oh, yeah, I remember that guy. What a load of crap. Anybody right now overtly, publicly calling for revolution could possibly be a government agent trying to attract people that they can report as dangerous to the new Carney regime. And we'll call it what it is. It's a regime. The time may come for that, my friends. The time may come when we're foraging on Crown lands and waterways for food, sustenance, water, like that government report said. That was on the Horizons Canada website, horizons.gc.ca. It's part of the government. It's part of the Privy Council, this Horizons. They're the same people that were talking about biodigital convergence. All of that stuff is still on their website. So yeah, it does come from the government. It is publicly funded. That's what Pierre Poilievre was talking about in the last week of the campaign leading up to the election. If it gets to that, or as we can see it coming to that, then maybe we can get up and start fighting back in terms of a revolution. But we're going to have to watch and see. Right now is not the time. And I know there are people who are angry still about the results of that election. I do have a little bit of good news regarding that coming up in just a couple of seconds here on the Shadow at Night live stream, which is always brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com.
It's toothpaste to SilverSuticals toothpaste. First, we're starting out with Crest. It's a classic. It's an original. It's what I've used most of my life. But that being said, it does have its problems. First off, the consistency is so weird and thick, and I get it's a paste, but it really doesn't spread that well. And I must also say that I'm not in love with the taste. I get toothpaste isn't supposed to taste good, but why shouldn't it? But that being said, it does get the job done. Next, we have SilverSuticals. They have 3 flavors, but today we're going with Bubbleberry. And already it smells so good. So I'm excited to see what this tastes like. The consistency is also a lot smoother, and I must say it spreads way nicer in your mouth.
This literally tastes like fruit bubblegum.
Yeah, this toothpaste was pretty good. I actually went in for seconds. And it's infused with nano silver, so it helps remineralize your teeth and keep them fresh throughout the day.
100% go with SilverSuticals.
And here's the results. What's your favorite toothpaste?
CanadaNanoSilver.com, of course. Bubbleberry, spearmint, cinnamon. CanadaNanoSilver.com. 204-808-9292 if you want to talk directly to Kevin and Anna, or if you want to just send them an email. If you have any questions about the products, you can contact them through the website. The contact button's in the upper right-hand corner of the website, CanadaNanoSilver.com. All the great products are there if you want to go shopping. Tonight for the all-access Night Hawks on the extension, ShadowDavis.com, I have an interesting piece from Dr. Jane Ruby. And she says, they put what into the shot? They put what into the shot? It's confirmed, according to Dr. Ruby. Also, another draw for one of these. It's the Shadow at Night live ball cap. Or one of these, the Shadow at Night Live. I don't want to spill it because it's filled with water. The Shadow at Night Live mug, 20-ouncer, baby. And that's going to be the choice of the winner tonight. And we'll make that draw 5 minutes or so into the extension tonight, just after 9 o'clock Central. Okay, let's begin the show. But before we do that, hello, Barb, watching from southern Manitoba. Laura's watching in Beausejour, Manitoba. Royce wants to know who the music is from. That's my secret. I'm sorry, but I can't tell you that. Deborah, hello, how are you? Tuning in from the future in Australia. I guess you guys are. You're what, 16, 18 hours in front of us? Hello, Nancy. How you doing? Asking for some heat on the West Coast. Well, if we had some heat, we'd send it your way, my dear. Jeffrey is watching tonight. Lana, Darlene in Oak Lake. Jeannie is watching in Calgary, where apparently it's 20 degrees. And hello, Lynn, watching in Wyndham Center, Ontario, wherever you're watching tonight, whatever platform you happen to be watching on. Maybe it's Rumble you're watching on tonight. Huber is watching. Uniacke, Vilma Dau, Notable, Stump Slayer, Joking Dumb, You Go Girl, 1, 2, 3, Dokar. Get it out there to as many people as you possibly can, you guys. Like and share. It's pretty important. Okay, so last night we had the patriotic dad on the show, Mr. Rob Boudelier. In case you missed that show, I suggest you go back and watch it. Rob is a lifetime Albertan. He is a single dad of 3 children. He works in the oil patch, or has worked in the oil patch. And he's also a former member of the Alberta Prosperity Project, still kind of works with them and absolutely believes in what they believe in. The problem in Alberta right now, as we covered last night, is that there are so many different groups all advocating for the same thing, which is Alberta sovereignty. But the problem is they can't exactly agree on how it should be done or how far it should go. Should it be just a bargaining chip for Danielle Smith and the provincial government versus the feds, or should it be something that goes considerably further? And if it does, should it be Alberta sovereignty, or should it be possibly joining the United States as the 51st state, or some sort of U.S. protectorate / territory? So there's all kinds of moving parts to this right now, and there is a petition flying around. Sign this if you believe in Alberta separation. But the thing is, it's not really official yet, because all of the groups, excuse me, haven't gotten together and decided what that question should be for the petition. Remembering that they have to get a certain number, and I know that Bill 54 was introduced the other day, which reduces significantly the amount of signatures required for Alberta separation. But that bill hasn't passed yet. It's going to be a couple of months, maybe even longer, because, the legislatures all break for the summertime. But it could become law by the fall, maybe early winter, in which case it would be a much easier job for all of the sovereigntist movements to get those signatures onto a petition. But the pushback has already begun. Last night, Rob suggested, and this is something that I had completely blanked on up until last night, and he brought up some good points. He said, Shadow, think about how many people are going to be pushing back on this. The entire left is going to be pushing back on this. So this means the NDP, and they're going to get their union buddies to go ahead and push back on this. The federal government is going to push back on this. All of the media, the left-wing corporate media, is going to be pushing back on this. And he said they might possibly spend billions of dollars in marketing against Alberta sovereignty simply because they know it would be more expensive to lose Alberta from Canada's economy than it would to spend that kind of money keeping it, trying to convince people not to sign that petition, trying to convince people to say, hey, you know what? It's better off that we stay in Canada, like staying in an abusive relationship. So here's a CBC piece today that was written by a guy called Jason Markusoff, who is a CBC reporter / analyst out of Calgary. And Jason says Danielle Smith's reform is, and this, we're talking about Bill 54 here, is nudging Alberta separation vote from if toward when. UCP bill slashes total of signatures needed to force referendum activists were already planning. And yeah, it has been in the planning stages, but once again, there's still a lot of disagreement. It's almost like, if you guys have ever seen the miniseries, John Adams, starring Paul Giamatti as John Adams, the second president of the United States. They go through all of the hoops that they needed to go through in order to form a new nation separate from Britain. the United Kingdom in this period piece, obviously in the 1770s and the 1780s. It's remarkable how much fighting there was, at least according to this particular depiction, between states. Some states didn't want to fight against the UK. They wanted to remain with the UK. Others wanted to do it in negotiations, and some thought, we've got to go to war, which obviously they did. But yeah, the arguing, the bickering. And I believe that's probably what's going, you're forming a new nation here. So there should be a lot of debate, but I'm certainly hoping that they can keep it civil. 177,000 people. That's roughly 3.5% of Alberta's population. It's almost the amount of signatures that will be needed to force a separation referendum, designed to take those 5 million people and their land out of Canada. Ooh. The reason I put this article up on the screen, you guys, is to let you know how ominous the CBC, the left-wing corporate media, makes this sound. There's nothing positive in this article at all. Alberta independence groups had already been gathering online registrants who were keen to add their names to a petition drive when the law required far more Albertans, around 600,000, to sign up to trigger a constitutional referendum. Well, it still does, like I just pointed out. And then, the day after the federal election delivered a fourth consecutive Liberal government, Premier Daniel Smith's government tabled electoral reform legislation that suddenly made it far, far easier for activists. They make them sound like demons. That's the same kind of, when you hear activist, you go, ooh. Activists, to put Alberta's existence within Canada on the ballot for voters. Alberta Prosperity Project, a group that was already plotting. See, again, there you go. Plot, plan, scheme. Plotting, like deviously behind closed doors. No, it's been wide open. It's out there. Already plotting a referendum petition drive before the Mark Carney Liberals win. Claims that it now has a sufficient number of people registered online to become signatories to meet this lower threshold. This was a federal election fought around how Canada could best unify in the face of the threat of U.S. tariffs. And Donald Trump's expressed desire. Lots of stuff on Donald Trump tonight, by the way, and it's hilarious and it's good. Trump's expressed desire to swallow our country whole. And now dissatisfaction with that vote's results have stoked those who want a permanent rupture in Canadian unity. So, of course, they're going to tell you that 3/4 oppose, according to an Angus Reid poll in early April. Alberta separatism is widely known as likely a losing proposition. So immediately they're cementing that idea in your head that if you are in favor of this, then you are one of the minority, my friend, and there's no point in even having that fight. That's how they're framing it. Smith herself noted to media Thursday an Angus Reid poll in early April showed 25% support, 75% opposition. Yes, we can add, thank you. But what she wouldn't acknowledge is that her government has helped her province's separatist movement get much closer to what they're looking for. So demonizing Smith as well. I'm not going to prejudge what citizens are going to do for a petition, Smith told a news conference, despite all the recent activism and publicity developing around one such petition in particular. The premier instead extolled the virtues of making it easier for citizens to practice the purest form of democracy on, any old issue of public importance. Whether that was intended to be a wink to the grassroots anti-liberal conservatives. What is an anti-liberal conservative? Just because you're, and again, liberal, the actual term is liberal, open-minded, free-thinking. That's what liberal is supposed to mean. Liberal, you're liberated, you're free. Today's version of liberal, no, it's not that at all. In name only. It's anti-liberal conservatives who form her political base or not. United Conservative Party President Rob Smith chose to see it that way. This announcement is giving you the pathway some of you were seeking today, he posted on Facebook, and making it easier. Here's a post he made. Pay attention, my friends. This announcement is giving you the pathway some of you are seeking today and making it easier. Right? Talking about the petition. When a commenter said, "We want to hear a path charting to independence or 51st state," the party president replied, "Please read her announcement, Mr. Carson. It's in there." Rob Smith, no relation to the premier. Smith. Like, how many Smiths are there anyway? Referred all questions about his social media remarks to the premier and justice minister. Well, you might imagine that a much lower threshold to require a sovereignty referendum would have been just what the pro-independence movement wanted and asked for. That's not the case, says one of its leaders. In fact, in many respects, we didn't want it changed because we figured the hurdle of getting to 600,000 would get us closer to the referendum plurality as well, Dennis Modry, a co-leader of the Alberta Prosperity Project, said. In other words, he's well aware of a newly enlarged gap between how easy it might be to trigger a binding referendum and the much larger number of Alberta votes his side would need to actually win that ballot measure, probably more than 1 million. Oh, more than that. His group has been collecting names and contact info for Albertans willing to physically sign a petition when a citizens' initiative drive gets launched. He said that database had 70,000 before the election, 120,000 more since Monday. What? What? They more than doubled since the election. Oh my God. And it's only just beginning. The frustration with the current circumstances that Alberta finds itself in with Eastern Canada is troublesome, and troublesome to the point that there are certainly well more than the requisite number of people to force the referendum, said Modry, a former doctor. He's also been an informal advisor to the premier, but said he hasn't discussed his referendum bid with her. To put the 177,000 figure in perspective, consider that 69,344 Calgarians signed the petition last year to recall Mayor Jody Gondek. That's from a population 1/3 the size of Alberta, and within only 60 days. The UCP amendments to election law would give referendum seekers 120 days to gather enough autographs. Meanwhile, 630,442 Albertans voted for the federal Liberals, whose victory appears to have stoked so much of this West wants out fervor. Excuse me. I am so sorry about that. I probably should pop myself off the screen when I have to do that. Anyway. Because Smith's electoral reforms could make the referendum less of an if than a when, that's a question worth asking, Modry. He said his group will likely launch the petition drive in a matter of weeks, potentially in the summer. The referendum's questions wording is still to be determined. Modry said he'd hope to trigger a referendum this summer once the provincial rules are changed and would like to see it on the ballot in conjunction with the fall's municipal elections. However, the timing of a vote is up to the provincial government. Smith has said she's committed to Alberta's sovereignty within a united Canada, kind of like the Quebec model, for remaining in the country but still wielding elbows. These CBC people and their elbows, to try to push Ottawa away from what the UCP perceive as intrusions into provincial jurisdiction. So it's always the UCP perceives it as intrusions into the provincial jurisdiction. It is, in fact, intrusions into provincial jurisdiction. This guy can't read. I guess he doesn't know what the Constitution says. Maybe these CBC analysts should probably get their facts before they write an opinion piece. Just my opinion. That's why Smith announced its latest constitutional challenge against the federal emissions policy on Thursday, this time the clean electricity regulations. The Alberta NDP is far from persuaded, of course. It's calling Smith a separatist herself. Look at how Danielle Smith deals with the NDP in the legislature.
We will fight to bring prices down. Why won't this premier commit to getting good deals for Albertans?
The Honourable Premier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're
well on our way with the NDP having only received 6.4% of the vote yesterday. That's a complete repudiation of all of the extreme policies that have been advanced by the Liberal NDP coalition, and I think it opens the door for us to have a constructive relationship about a more moderate approach so that we can develop pipelines, we can develop rights of way, we can end some of these destructive policies, and we can move forward on addressing the issues of energy security, affordability, and a reasonable plan to reduce emissions over a time frame that I believe our businesses will be able to meet.
In other words, it's like Danielle is telling that NDP MLA, just sit down, sweetheart. We're going to take care of everything. Don't worry about it. Here's a lollipop. However, they go on to say in this particular story, even flirting with a referendum to separate kills investment in the economy and damages relationships with First Nations people. We'll get to that in just a second. That came from NDP MLA Christina Gray. It's not going to help. It's going to make us the laughing stock of Canada. Well, I highly doubt that. I mean, the laughing stock to who anyway? The Laurentian elitists? The left-wing corporate media? Who cares? Multiple First Nations chiefs have warned Smith to tamp down the separatist threats because Alberta is on the land of Treaty 6, 7, and 8. Those treaties with the Crown and Alberta lacks the authority to interfere with or negate those treaties, Troy Knowlton, chief of the Piikani Nation, said. Proceeding down a path towards separation cannot be undertaken without the consent of Alberta's First Nations. Smith hasn't done anything to separate yet. She has not done anything. And she actually came out and said, our government will not initiate anything to do with separation. If the people want to, the people can. We've just changed the rules a little bit, or will be changing the rules a little bit. So sit down, Troy. Buddy, sit down, relax, have a drink, relax. The time will come. However, it's very good to know who the enemies are moving forward, right? So we know that these particular bands of First Nations are going to be standing up and fighting. As a matter of fact, they went so far as to send Danielle Smith today a letter of cease and desist. She hasn't done anything, but they sent her that letter anyway. Popular opinion itself may make the referendum a doomed proposition before any reckoning with Indigenous law or federal negotiation. Tim Hoven, a conservative grassroots organizer who said he's pushing for separation because he doesn't believe that Carney is going to do anything for Alberta, said there would be no chance of a successful referendum anytime in the next 6 months. That's not enough time to change people's hearts, he said. According to his math, around 7/8 of Albertans who just voted for the federal Conservatives would have to back sovereignty for a yes side to win. And one Alberta Conservative heavyweight is positioning himself as an Alberta Federalist. Jason Kenney posted a long message on his X today. Let's get to that. Here it is here. Albertans have good reason to be deeply frustrated with Ottawa. Despite making a net contribution of $20 billion to fiscal federalism every year, we faced a government in Ottawa fundamentally hostile to our largest industry, one central to Canada's economy. That's why. And he goes on to pat himself on the back here. Like, what does dude want? What does he want? He was kicked out forcibly as the premier of Alberta just a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I guess. Like, dude, relax, take a seat. You're an emeritus. You're the consigliere. If we need any advice from you, we'll ask. But he says, I led the fight against anti-growth policies like C-69. This is the No More Pipelines bill that Poilievre was talking about during the campaign and for the past, 5 years now, which I dubbed the No More Pipelines law. No, that was Poilievre. Building a coalition of 9 provinces and winning in our constitutional challenge at the Supreme Court. My government repealed the Alberta tax and sued Ottawa over the federal carbon tax. It took a few years, but it's gratifying to see that we finally won that fight. I sued Ottawa over its ridiculous plastics ban, winning at the Supreme Court. I sued Ottawa over Trudeau's unconstitutional invocation of the Emergencies Act, winning that case too. My government success... Is he in fantasy land here? My government successfully negotiated equivalency agreements with Ottawa to keep the feds out of our backyard and regulating industrial emissions, methane emissions, northern habitat, and much more. We applied constant pressure for the successful completion of the TMX. We held a referendum on equalization to give Albertans a voice of unfairness in the Federation. Where did that go, Jason? Nowhere. Alberta and Saskatchewan won our fight against Stephen Guilbeault's absurd clean electricity standard. I commissioned the Fair Deal panel to identify other ways to assert a strong Alberta within a united Canada, implementing most of its recommendations. And it's why Alberta and Saskatchewan are fighting against Carney's proposed big increase in the industrial carbon tax, which would massively disadvantage our trade-exposed industries and the proposed cap on oil sands productions. So it sounds, at least so far, in this very, very long and rambling tweet, and self-congratulatory as well, that he's with us. Let's read on. In these and other fights, Alberta wins when we make alliances with other provinces and patiently make the case to our fellow Canadians. Just look at the recent polling showing that supermajorities support both oil and gas pipelines in every province. The vast majority of First Nations now support responsible resource development, thanks in part to my government leading the way and helping Indigenous communities to become co-owners of big projects. Let's seize the momentum. We're winning the arguments. Well, I joined most Albertans in being disappointed with Monday's election results. Let's hold Carney to his words about making Canada a global energy superpower, deregulating to build big projects, including pipelines. Jason, did you read Carney's book at all? It's called Values. Maybe have a look at that before spouting such nonsense. Mark Carney is a net zero zealot, and he's never going to go back on that. Never. He'll advocate for the building of pipelines in Brazil, the building of pipelines in Saudi Arabia, but not in Canada. Oh, no. If we turn inward in a pointless debate on the charade of separation, we'll reverse that momentum. Never make a threat you can't keep. Despite our frustrations, the vast majority of Albertans are and always will be proud Canadians. With decades of the highest interprovincial migration, we've welcomed millions of folks from other provinces, making us the most Canadian province. It's why our Legislative Assembly is the only one in Canada proudly to display the flags of all 13 provinces and territories. We know that Canada isn't perfect, but it's our home and native land. Does he sound like one of them suddenly? What a switch. You'd figure the logical course for the rest of this tweet would be, and that's why I support Alberta leaving Confederation. But no. What rationale is there for staying in an abusive relationship? We know that a country is much more than a balance sheet or ledger of fiscal transfers. It's a community bound together by shared history, loyalty, values, traditions, and institutions. In the 50 years that a tiny minority of Westerners have pushed the separatist cause, they've only managed to win one by-election at the height of the national energy program. Separatists can't elect a dog catcher in Alberta. So why allow their feudal ranting to dominate the debate, distract from the real issues, and distort Alberta's real identity as a proud, confident, patriotic province? We're bold thinkers and big builders, not perennial victims. We honor those who went before us, including thousands of Albertans who died in the defense of Canada and who lie below gravestones marked forever by the maple leaf. We're Alberta proud and will always be part of the True North, strong and free. Whoa, dude. Okay, I'm going to ask you guys a question now. And I guess this is for Alberta viewers only. Do you support, and I want you to write down your answer, and I want you to think about it for 60 seconds before you do. Think about it. Actually sit down and think about it. Do you support Alberta sovereignty? Just write a yes or no down. You can write your reasons, of course. I'll look at this after the show is over tonight. I'm really interested in what your responses are. So again, it's a yes or no. Do you support Alberta sovereignty? These are the people and again, there's no wrong answer here. Okay. Nobody is going to come after you. And if they do, I'll take care of it myself. But nobody should come after you in the comments and disparage your answer. If you don't support it, that's fine. You don't have to say why. You can say, no, I support remaining Canadian, remaining in Canada. Keeping in mind that when Jeff Rath was on, he's with the APP, by the way, the Alberta Prosperity Project. When he was on a few weeks ago, he said, look, we're not asking anybody to give up their Canadian citizenship. It would be Alberta as a nation. You can have Albertan citizenship and you can retain your Canadian citizenship. You can leave the province when you want. You can come back in when you want. You'll have both. It'll be a transition in that way, he said. Now, we didn't get into the nuts and bolts of that particular discussion, but I can understand that. That makes for a very valid point. Here's another tweet today that came from, who is this guy here? Jeffrey Luscombe. Let me throw this up here. Jeffrey Luscombe is a writer, I think, or author. It says, best-selling author, called one of fiction's brightest new stars by the Huffington Post. Yay, good for you, buddy. He says, wait till the Alberta separatists find out how much of the federal debt they'll have to take with them. Think you'll walk away without paying your share of the bill? Ha! So this is the typical liberal, Laurentian elitist mentality coming through. Keeping in mind that people do vote with their feelings quite often. We saw that in the election on Monday. And if the liberal Easterners keep laughing at Alberta sovereignists, they might be in for a rude awakening. They could lose 10, 20% of their economy if Alberta leaves. And the Canadian pension plan, forget about it. So they're playing with fire here. I don't think I've ever seen Alberta particularly more stoked about this than I've ever seen. I mean, it's remarkable, really. I think I've told this story on the show before, but I'll repeat it now. And that is my dad. You know, when I was a kid, I think I was maybe 12 years old, and I saw my dad walking around with this ball cap. He never wore ball caps. My dad was a guy, he had one of those, what do they call it? The ducktail haircut from the 50s, kind of like Fonzie, always had that, and a mustache. But this one day, he was wearing this baseball cap, and I looked up at my dad, and I said, hat? You're wearing a hat? He goes, yeah, here, have a look at it. And it said, Western Republic of Western Canada, all 4 Western provinces by themselves, on the front of this ball cap. And I thought, what does that mean? Now, at that age, I thought separation, that meant actual physical separation, like the country was going to physically separate, like we're going to have to get pickaxes out, we're going to have to dig down to the bottom and just push off from Ontario all along the border. But that's a different thing. I said, do you think that would be a good idea? Hell yes! Enough of this Eastern bullshit. No, I never heard my dad talk like that. And it was only that one time. I guess that lasted maybe for a couple of days. And after that, we never really discussed it again. And like I say, that would have been 77, 78-ish. So, yeah. And nothing came of it then. And then the National Energy Project that Trudeau Sr. implemented really caused some rage in Alberta. And then in the 90s, the Reform Party, the West wants in. Well, now the West wants out. They've tried. They've tried and tried and tried. So what you're going to be hearing a lot, and I know I've talked about it pretty much every single night since the election, so that's 3 shows in a row. We've talked about Alberta separating from Canada. I think this is only going to pick up steam. So let's continue on with other stuff now. And by the way, I'm looking at getting Keith on next week. Keith Wilson, lawyer Keith Wilson, who's also a big believer in Alberta sovereignty. Hopefully he will join the show Monday or Tuesday night. Michelle Ferrari dropped a video today, and she was talking about the left-wing corporate media in it. And I thought it was pretty interesting and also pretty damning for the media at the same time. Watch.
Just Michelle here. You know, it's like I just, so that video that I did yesterday, talking about my loss, and I did it online about how we need to come together and we need to find a sweet spot and, you know, losing the election and learning from the election and what we need to do moving forward, because clearly there's half and half. If you didn't see the video, it's on my Instagram. CTV does an article on my video, doesn't interview me, just does an article and positions it like I'm throwing Pierre under the bus. Like, this is why people have divisiveness. Like, the very thing that I said in the video that we need to stop doing, the media is feeding this. Sorry, but it's brutal. They go, she never once mentioned Pierre. Yes, I did mention Pierre, number one. And number two, they spun it like it's like they want people to have infights. They want that. I fully support Pierre Poilievre. I think he is one of the most exceptional leaders of our time. What he was able to do in a short period of time against factors that he could not control. This guy did an incredible job. His family did an incredible job. His team did an incredible job. Is there lessons to be learned? Obviously. Hello, like anything, after any race, anything you have to learn. But CTV, like, this is why we have to fight back. This is why you have to speak up. Like, the media is such an antagonist to all of this, and it's so frustrating. Share this video. Like, don't do this, CTV. I would have happily come and had a speech with you on your show and had dialogue, but no, you spin it and you put it into your media like, oh yeah, she's mad. She didn't mention Pierre. She must think he caused the problem. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then they have to bring up, the CBC did this article on me today too. Oh, a top MPs they say all these nice things about all these other MPs. And then they say Michelle Ferrier's made outlandish comments. And they link the link to the article about me talking about parents trafficking their children. Guys, I never said parents traffic their children. The organizations who deal with these folks said that. Kawartha Sexual Assault Center, they're on record. This is not a new phenomenon. I'm sorry you don't want to believe these terrible things, but they are happening. Just because you don't want to believe it doesn't mean it's not happening. Just Google it. Just search it. Parents do traffic their children. It's a horrible, horrible reality that we need to fix. We need to deal with human trafficking. We need to stop it. But like, vilifying somebody for speaking the truth is bananas. And then the media, the mainstream media doing this, guys, this has got to stop. Like, you got to call out the media and don't buy into it. Don't buy into it when you see that. And I'm like, oh, and they create this gossip train. And that's why we have this, folks. That's why we have this extreme division. Because now, Michelle's a bad, like, stop it. Stop it. Just lay off the sauce, media. Lay off the sauce and report the facts, not your feelings. If you want to be an advocate, go be an advocate. But don't call yourself a journalist if you're not going to report the facts.
Yeah. Or don't paint yourself as neutral, as a neutral news source, when you're clearly not. You know what position I take every night. You guys know exactly where I'm coming from. You know how I vote. You know who I support, right? And with that kind of disclosure, you know what you're going to get on this show. And I'm hoping that all of the other independent media do that as well. But the left-wing corporate media, no, they still depict themselves as something straight down the middle, straight shooters, just the news here. But they're not. And they haven't been for many, many, many years. Why? Well, according to left-wing corporate CTV, more than 100 media outlets have received $22.2 million in Google payments. That comes from the journalism group. To 108 Canadian news outlets. That's the organizing, distributing money from Google that they agreed to give media businesses in exchange for an exemption from the Online News Act, or Bill C-18. So the Canadian Journalism Collective, whatever that is, announced yesterday that the top recipients who received more than $1 million each include Post Media. That's the National Post, by the way. The Globe and Mail, Metroland Media Group, La Presse, Coopérative Nationale de l'Information Indépendante. Not independent. How can you call yourself independent when you're getting funding through the government? Even though this funding technically doesn't come from the government, it comes from a government law that Google has to give it, or they can't use any links and provide any news for Canadians at all. It actually surprises me that Google agreed to this when Facebook Meta did not. You still can't share news links on Facebook Meta. You have to take screenshots. The Black Press Group and the Canadian Press, surprise, surprise, also got the funding. About 100 other organizations received smaller amounts, many of which reached six figures. The payments were issued on the 23rd of April. They make up 60% of the totals organization will receive, each receive with two more tranches expected to flow by the end of the year. The money is part of the $100 million in payments Google will make annually in order to secure a 5-year exemption to the Online News Act, which is meant to help journalism recoup losses incurred in part by tech platforms. It's absolute garbage. And guess what? Mark Carney has vowed to push for more internet censorship. This is a story that came out a couple of weeks ago. He said it during the election campaign. Of course, the left-wing corporate media said nothing about it. This comes from Western Standard. Mark Carney says a re-elected Liberal government will move forward with new regulations targeting harmful online content. Translation, content they don't agree with. Making a third attempt to legislate internet speech in Canada. Blacklock's reporter says Carney made the comments during a campaign rally in Hamilton after being interrupted by hecklers. Responding to accusations from the crowd, including questions about ties to the late financier Jeffrey Epstein, Carney paused briefly before refocusing his remarks. He said, there are many serious issues that we're dealing with. One of them is the sea of misogyny. What? Anti-Semitism, hatred, conspiracy theories, this sort of pollution online that washes over our virtual borders from the United States. Well, Carney said he could tolerate conspiracy theories directed at him personally. He emphasized the broader danger to Canadian society. The more serious thing is when it affects how people behave. When Canadians are threatened going to their community centers or their places of worship or their school, or God forbid, when it affects our children. What about gender-affirming care, you dumbass? My government, if we're elected, will be taking action. No details on what action he wants to take. By the way, the Liberals have lost a seat. They're down to 168 now. The Liberals lost the Quebec riding of, Terrebonne? No. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the story here, because remember last night I told you there were two very, very close ridings. So Liberals lose Quebec riding according to revised election results. Ding, ding, ding. They're back to 168 and the Bloc up to 23 after the Bloc took back the Montreal area riding of Terrebonne. According to revised election results, Election Canada published their validated riding results today, which show the Bloc incumbent Natalie Sinclair de Gagné 23,340 votes, 44 ahead of her Liberal challenger. There's another one they mention here as well. The suspense is not over in the riding of Terrebonne, as the close result means there will automatically be a judicial recount in the coming days. And that would be a Conservative win if that happens. So that would bring the Liberals down to 167. But again, like I said to you last night, there is talk about the NDP, some of them anyway, crossing the floor. And now I'm hearing there's actual money being offered to some of these NDP MPs. Bribes to cross the floor and become Liberals so they have a majority. Yep. Now, again, that cannot be verified at this point, but I have heard it from some very good sources. This is from the Canadian Press that was not published on any of the big left-wing corporate media, so we had to go to Steinbach Online to get this. Our Canadian Press provides news stories, filler stories for all of the big news outlets in Canada, but they didn't want to touch this one. Longest ballot group declares victory in Poilievre's former riding amid criticism. Group trying to make a case for electoral reform by creating yeah, sure they are. They don't care about electoral reform. They cared about keeping Pierre Poilievre out of the House of Commons. Electoral reform by creating very long why did they do it in Poilievre's riding? They're declaring victory in this week's election, even as critics accuse it of indulging in stunts that undermine democracy. It's been a success, said Mark Mutter, one of dozens of protest candidates who ran in the Ottawa riding of Carleton. I've never seen people looking more optimistically at electoral reform ever. The longest ballot committee started targeting ridings in 2021 by nominating multiple people, some of them living in other provinces, in order to ensure extremely large ballots. The committee's stated goal is to spark a national conversation about electoral reform. It says it wants to see a citizens' assembly put in charge of crafting a new electoral system and argues that political blah, 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 blah. This has absolutely nothing to do with electoral reform. It has everything to do with wanting Pierre Poilievre out of the House of Commons. Mario for the North actually came up with a really good video yesterday regarding Poilievre's situation, and here it is.
Using his riding just never sat well with me. He's held it for 20 years, so I decided to do some digging. Watch this. As many of you know, Pierre Poilievre has held his riding of Carleton for nearly 20 years. He was just recently beaten, and this is what his riding looks like. This is Carleton, and as you can see, it wraps around this area around there. I'll move my head out of the way. I want you to see the full area of Carleton. And this is from the Elections Canada website. His area, the region that I just showed you, it didn't look like that. In fact, in all of the other elections, it looked like this. It never had this area. Remember that. This area right here, that's brand new. I'm going to shrink myself down to size so you can see that new area that was integrated with his. This is what it looked like in 2021 when they had the 44th election. And I'm going to explain all this red in just a second, and it's all going to make sense. So Pierre's area, labeled as number 88 over here, that's what he had the whole time. Before, it was integrated with this. And everything I'm taking is publicly available, so check it yourself. But this is how much he won last time, a 15% margin. Just to remind you, that's the area that he used to represent before that came into the picture in 2023. Yes, the adjustment was done recently. Let me put it to you this way. Pierre Poilievre's riding, which had always been conservative and he held for 20 years, was merged with a heavy liberal region. An area altogether that had grown by nearly 50% due to immigration. That's going to be important. Watch this. Now this is where we get to the good part. Did you know that nearly 93% of all immigrants move into one of Canada's 44 census metropolitan areas? And I know this is talking about non-permanent residents as well, which is also calculated is a very similar percentage, which is almost the 93%. But when you have that, that's why metropolitan areas like Ottawa, the whole Greater Toronto area, includes Burlington, Oakville, Milton's getting there too. Look at Hamilton. And I know this says Hamilton here, but this is the outskirts of Hamilton. That's the city core. And let's not forget Montreal, all red. And the same holds true for all of Metro Vancouver. Take it from an immigrant. When immigrants move into the country, they generally vote Liberal because that's the same party that offered social assistance. It's the same party that pays them each month more than Canadians get in old age security. They are now giving them free healthcare. They are able to stay at 4-star hotels. They get access to the same child benefit as you have as Canadians who've paid taxes your whole life. Sorry, your whole working life. Roughly $7,000 per child per year. Child of 3 gives you over $21,000 depending on their age. It might even be more. We are talking about more money than they would ever earn or save in their lifetime in 1 or 2 years. And I know what you're thinking. These are immigrants. They're not actual Canadian citizens. In the 90s, Canada was affordable, so nearly 75%. This is called the naturalization rate. The percentage of immigrants that come into Canada that then become citizens. Right now, it's at about 45%. We've seen a massive 30% drop because of how unaffordable the country's become under Liberal policies. And that's why out in the Atlantic, you see a lot of red. more permanent immigrants heading for the Maritimes. And let's not forget that Canada grew by a record 1 million people solely from immigration, and we did it in under just 9 months. That's how we were able to hit a population of 41 million. And this article was from back in March 2024, using 2023 data. A similar thing happened in 2022, 2021, to the point where the immigration minister said Canada should have acted sooner on migration. And guess what? As an immigrant myself, I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. The Liberal Party is importing voters. Here's an example of something that should be questioned. How is it that the maritime provinces, the ones where all the immigrants are headed to and experiencing record growth, how is it that they have 2.4 million people and have 32 federal seats? Alberta has almost double. Not quite, but almost. They only have 5 more seats. Why don't they have 60? Each voter in Atlantic Canada has 55% more representation than an Albertan. Take a guess which one's liberal and which one's conservative. My friends, there's always more to the story. This is what Pierre had. This is what he was given in this election. Why else do you think that Mark Carney launched his bid in Edmonton, this was back in January, to become the next prime minister and take over for Trudeau? He did it there because that's where he was raised. That's where he grew up. But remember, his riding was not there because he was at risk and he knew that. And where was Mark Carney's riding? It was right beside Pierre Poilievre's in Nepean, the red zone. My friends, these things do not happen by accident. And let me remind you, how did Carney get his seat? They kicked out a sitting member of parliament, Chandra Arya. They revoked his ability to re-enter nomination so Carney could have a safe seat. There's always more to the story, and I can promise you, you won't see this on TV, you won't see this on the news.
At Mario for the North on Instagram, and he's also quite big on X, I think, but he doesn't go by Mario for the North there. He goes by Mario Zelaya, if you guys want to follow him there. So where is this leading us? Obviously, that's all to do with the Century Initiative, this incredible population growth that Canada's experienced in these last few years. It's part of the agenda. They're also using something called the Cloward-Piven strategy for that, which is this.
Cloward-Piven strategy was developed by Richard Cloward and Francis Piven in the 1960s. It outlines a strategy for radical social change by way of abusing the system to the point of destruction.
You know, we were associated with the social work tradition, which said that the programs worked as they were supposed to work. But they didn't work as they were supposed to work. And it was out of that realization, that insight, that we developed the strategy to end poverty, which called for a massive mobilization of social workers and lawyers and organizers to get people the benefits to which they were entitled. We were proposing a kind of movement that demanded what people were already entitled to by law, by regulation, by propaganda.
The primary goal of the Cloward-Piven strategy is to create a political and economic crisis that would destroy capitalism and lead to the implementation of a socialist system with a guaranteed income. The strategy involves enrolling large numbers of people into the welfare system, as many people as it takes to overwhelm and strain the system until it collapses. Everyone enrolled into the welfare system is also used as an army to carry out the destruction of the current system. They are registered to vote and instructed on how to vote. They are organized and mobilized and made to appear as grassroots organizations demanding more from the system. The ideal outcome of the Cloward-Piven strategy is to collapse the current system. According to their theory, this will compel the government to implement a universal basic income, which would then shift the U.S. towards a more socialist system with increased government control over the economy. Everyone is being encouraged to do it, burn it down, is the new sexy ring. In high school, they compare it to the American Revolution.
The Cloward-Piven strategy is a political gambit designed to overwhelm the American government by placing so many demands on the bureaucratic structure that it collapses. It's sort of a shock and awe campaign, a surprise attack on entrenched systems meant to force major changes to the ways that things are handled by the government. It may be messy, but it does harken back to a fundamental ideology of the American Republic. If it ain't fixed, break it.
All of this explains the likes of AOC.
What people like AOC are doing, what the squad is doing, is really very important, very important. But at the same time, there is this movement which is so big. Some people say it's the biggest movement in American history. It's hard to know because it's hard to measure a movement, but it is big and it is interracial and it penetrates into every small town. I now am in upstate New York. The town I'm closest to has maybe 2,000 people. You know, we have little demonstrations in front of the post office for Black Lives Matter. And this is Trump country. Nevertheless, there is a Black Lives Matter demonstration. So it's a very potent and important moment in American political development. And we have to make the most of it, because if we don't know what's going to happen, but it's not going to be good.
Reporting for
She's 91 years old now, and you can look her up if you like. Frances Piven. What you're going to find is the word Marxist over and over and over again, which leads me to this. Oracle Films has put out a trailer for an upcoming movie, which is called The Agenda, Their Vision, Your Future. There is no release date for this yet, as it's still in production. But here's a look at the trailer.
The lust to control other human beings is a story as old as time. There's a very strong drift in the direction of globalization, of the ultimate centralization of control in the hands of unelected officials at supranational organizations.
They want all of the resources of the world in their pocket.
The bigger picture is that an attempt is underway now to collapse liberal democracy and replace it with global technocracy.
This is a coup. They're saying we can control with rules. We don't need currency anymore.
It's like an inverted prison. You are supposedly free to roam about, but everything you want to access is behind lock and key.
The potential for social control is gigantic and potentially irreversible.
They plan to commandeer land, reduce farming, and radically change the food we eat, transform the supply of electricity, and then dictate how we use it, and replace currency with a system of credits. All three strategies are built on the premise of a climate crisis caused by carbon dioxide.
I do not think there's a climate crisis, and I base that on all the evidence and the climate data sets that we build to answer questions just like that. The government is very clear that they want a catastrophic story.
There is no single science paper that proves conclusively that humans control all or most of the global climate.
Europe's mad dash towards net zero is effectively economic suicide. Politicians are purposely impoverishing ordinary people, purposely deindustrializing Europe.
It's just tremendous amount of damage in the name of saving the planet. It does make you ask, what is it we're actually saving if we're paving it over?
I think what we're dealing with here is actually a global war on agriculture.
When you look at how many farms are selling up, we're walking into food shortages.
If I can switch everybody from real food to pharma food, then 100% of the agriculture industry can go through my publicly traded stocks, and I have complete control.
This is the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world. But it's far more than that. It's a blueprint. It is the action plan.
All life on Earth is going to be radically changed.
Everything will be monitored. The environmental consequences of every human action.
The general population cannot fathom the psychopathy of the vision that they're facing.
Once the digital ID is in place, it's game over for humanity.
Have they come at you in your province yet or state? Because I know we have some American viewers watching tonight. Hello, American viewers. Have they come at you yet with digital ID? Has it happened? Write it down in the comments, please. I know that Doug Ford talked about it about a year ago, but I haven't seen, I could have missed it, but I haven't seen anything that says any one particular province or state is introducing digital ID with look ahead to the future to replace all IDs issued with the digital. And we can put everything that you need on that, your bank information, even the house key. Yeah. So that could be coming. Keep your eyes and ears open for it. Donald Trump had an interesting discussion with an ABC reporter. His name is Terry Moran yesterday. And it was over deportations. For whatever reason, the media down there seems to be supporting these gang members running free while Trump's ICE tries to track them down. There was a judge in California who issued a ruling just a couple of days ago that said, no, you ICE agents have to have warrants before you can go and stop and arrest these people, which is completely and totally against the law. So that judge probably should be arrested just like the other one was in Michigan. Anyway, here is this, I don't want to call it an altercation, but let's just say, altercation between Terry Moran from ABC and Donald Trump.
Member of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute
Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
He had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was photoshopped.
That was photoshopped. Terry, you can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. But I picked you, Terry. But you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture.
And you think it was Photoshop? Well,
here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine, sir.
Terry,
I want to get to Ukraine.
So, he says, I'm not an expert 30 seconds after saying that was Photoshopped. That's the media for you.
No. He had MS, as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because
when
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go on. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't
Take a look
there,
at the
but
photograph.
they're there now, right?
No,
but they're there
in
now.
your picture.
Terry.
Ukraine, sir.
He's got MS-13 on his knuckles.
All right.
Okay?
Well, we'll take a look at that.
You do such a disservice.
We'll take a look at that,
Why don't you
sir.
just say, yes, he does, and, go on to something else.
It's contested.
What can you say? Stephen Miller is the deputy chief of staff at the White House, and you've seen him dress down the media before. Watch this.
Those two men kidnapped a young girl named Jocelyn Ungary from her family. They beat her, they sexually assaulted her, they tortured her, they stripped her, they murdered her, and they dumped her body. That is what the Biden administration's policy was. Most of your papers never covered her story when it happened. To the extent that you covered it at all, it was because President Trump forced you to cover it by highlighting it repeatedly over and over again. He had to shame you into covering it. And each and every one of you that sides over and over again with these MS-13 terrorists To the extent that you have the financial means to do so, you all choose to live in condos or homes or houses as far away from these kinds of gangbangers as you possibly can. If I offered any one of you a rent-free home with no taxes to pay in any of these gang neighborhoods, and I said your neighbors are MS-13 terrorists or Mexican mafia or Sinaloa cartel or Tren de Aragua, I couldn't pay you to live there. But yet you, with your coverage, are trying to force innocent Americans to have these people as their neighbors, and that one day their daughter may be abducted from their home and raped and murdered. So you're not going to get an ounce of sympathy from this administration or President Trump for the terrorists who've invaded our homes and our country.
Isn't there a law that they can pass that says the media must not be biased? Isn't there something they can do? Because this is out of control. I mean, and it's so obvious. It is so glaringly obvious, not just in Canada, obviously. It's in the United States as well. How are they able to stay alive down there? You know, with more and more people. And again, guys, you know, the Americans are so far ahead of us in getting out of this woke crap. It exists down there. I'm not going to lie to you. Obviously it does, but not to the extent that it does here. I mean, we're still smothered by it down there, and they're just kind of a little squeaking mouse in the corner at this stage of the game. Anyhow, I'm sure they'd come back very strong if given the opportunity, but they need to be minimized even further until they finally give up and go away. But the media, for whatever reason, just cannot see the forest for the trees. It's crazy. Now, I'm not going to read this whole story for you. I'll just show you the headline here because we're kind of pressed for time, but the Trump administration dismisses nearly 400 scientists working on congressionally mandated national climate report because they don't see the point. What's the point? Well, this report only comes out every 4 years. Yeah, well, so what? What are you going to say? More garbage? It's quite funny. Couple more headlines here for you. Nickelback faces backlash from Canadians. Whatever. For headlining MAGA-friendly U.S. music festival alongside Kid Rock. The hard rock titans from Alberta are currently on an American tour described as a celebration of the country's God-fearing patriots. All right. And Nickelback, no stranger to controversy. I don't think they care. Last thing tonight before we move to the extension on shadowdavis.com. And yes, it will be up on Telegram tonight. The extension will. And Dr. Jane Ruby, from a couple of months ago, exposing they put what in the shots? They put what in there? Nothing we haven't heard before, but she does show us some absolute proof. Virginia Giuffre left behind a note. Now, this is the woman who was repeatedly abused on Epstein Island, right? When she was a kid, a teenager, even younger. And she died recently. She got hit by a truck about 3 weeks ago. She posted on X that she had 3 days to live because then her kidneys were going to somehow fail. And she survived that miraculously, only to die a week or so later from an alleged suicide. And this is what People magazine says. Virginia Giuffre left behind a note with personal meaning before her death by suicide. But if we go to X, we see that Virginia publicly declared that she is not suicidal and warned that if anything happens to her, the people should ensure those responsible are held accountable and never forget their actions. Too many evil people want to see me quieted, she said. And here's her message. I'm making it publicly known that in no way, shape, or form am I suicidal. I have made this known to my therapist and my general practitioner. If something happens to me, in the sake of my family, do not let this go away and help me to protect them. Too many evil people want to see me quiet. Not suicidal, but apparently she died of suicide. Don't forget to like and share. You guys get this out to as many people as we possibly can. And for those of you who are watching live on YouTube right now, 60% of you have not liked, have not smashed that like button. I hate saying that, but that's apparently what YouTubers say. So go ahead and hit that like button and get me up to 3,000 there on YouTube. Not to say that this YouTube channel is going to last too much longer because I'll probably get banned for something. But do me the favor and hit the like button. And that goes to the same if you're watching on Facebook or Rumble or whatever platform, X. The more followers we get, the more successful this show becomes, the more people we can reach, and the better the guests we can get on the show. Now, there is no show tomorrow night, at least not by me, but you'll be happy to hear, just like last week, that bearded Canuck is going to be doing a live tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central Time, and his guests are going to be Dolan Leger, like last week, and Tanner Milligan, but he's also going to have two pretty well-known Canadians on the show, Chris Barber and Tamara Leach, right? So I promised that bearded Canuck that I would restream his show here on this platform tomorrow night. So I won't be here tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, but those guys will. Feel free to enjoy that discussion with that bearded Canuck tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver, CanadaNanoSilver.com. You guys have a fantastic rest of your night and have a great weekend as well. I'll catch you for the extension for you all-access Nighthawks at ShadowDavis.com in just a couple of minutes. And don't forget, we're making a draw tonight for another prize, but only if you're a member of ShadowDavis.com. I love you all. I appreciate you all, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.